Some heroes don't wear medals. Some simply never leave your side. This is not just a story about a dog. It's a story about what it means to come back from the dark and the unspoken power of love that saves us when nothing else can. In the next 30 minutes, you'll witness a bond that defied logic, a rescue that rewrote fate, and the kind of loyalty only found in the heart of a soldier, one with 4 legs and unbreakable eyes. Stay with me until the end, because what happens in the final moment will change how you see love, survival, and the quiet strength of never giving up. In the quiet hills of rural Vermont, where pine trees whispered in the wind and the snow seemed to fall a little more gently, there sat a small, weathered farmhouse with a hand-carved wooden sign at the gate. Collins K9 Sanctuary, a place to rest. From the outside, it looked like any other countryside home, but inside, it was a sanctuary for warriors whose battles had ended 4-legged heroes who had once served and saved, now living out their days in peace. Elena Collins, the woman behind it all, was not your typical small-town resident. She was a former Army veterinarian who had served 2 tours overseas, patching up injured military dogs in makeshift field hospitals and watching too many of them not make it home. After retiring, she returned to the quiet of Vermont with one goal: to give retired working dogs a second chance, a soft place to land when their missions were over. But Elena wasn't alone. Living with her was her 11-year-old son, Liam, a quiet, solemn child whose once sparkling laughter had been silenced by tragedy. Just a year before, Liam and his father had been in a car accident during a blizzard. Liam survived. His father didn't. Since then, Liam hadn't spoken more than a handful of words. He hadn't returned to school. He barely left his room. The world outside moved on, but inside the Collins house, time stood still. Elena tried everything: therapy, art, music, but nothing reached her son. He flinched at loud noises, refused hugs, and often sat staring out the window for hours, lost in a world no one else could enter. Some nights, she heard him cry in his sleep, whispering words that never made it to daylight. Then came Max. Max was a retired 9, a muscular slate-gray pit bull with amber eyes and a long history of heroism. He had served in California during one of the state's deadliest wildfire seasons. Trained in search and rescue, Max had located 3 missing children and pulled 2 firefighters from a collapsing hillside before his own career ended in fire and blood. During his final mission, Max had refused to leave a trapped handler and a young boy who had wandered into the danger zone. He dug, barked, pulled, and refused every command to retreat. He saved them both. But as the fire line collapsed, Max's rear leg was crushed by falling debris. By the time his handler reached him, Max was barely breathing. He underwent emergency surgery, but his leg was permanently damaged, and his handler, now moved across the country, couldn't keep him. Behavioral assessments said Max had become distant, untrusting. Not aggressive, but withdrawn. Not adoptable, one shelter called him. Too much trauma, another wrote. That's when Elena received a call from a colleague in the rescue network. "There's a dog who needs your kind of care," they said. "But he's a tough case. Been through hell and back." When Max arrived, it was snowing. Elena remembered the moment clearly. The transport van door opened, and Max stepped out slowly, limping slightly, his head low. His handler had sent a worn vest and a collar with a tag that read, "Max, 9-2765, Rescue Unit Delta." Most of the other dogs at the sanctuary barked or sniffed curiously at newcomers. Max didn't react. He simply scanned the space, then sat down, still as stone. Not tense, not afraid, just tired. Elena gave him space, as she always did. No pressure, no commands. Max ate and drank. He watched, but he didn't connect. Not with the other dogs, and not with her. Until Liam appeared. He hadn't come down for breakfast. He rarely did. But that morning, as snowflakes danced against the window, Liam stood at the top of the stairs in his oversized hoodie, holding a worn blanket in his arms. For a moment, he simply stared at Max. The dog stared back. No barking, no tail wag, just eye contact, long and unbroken, and something passed between them. Not recognition, but understanding. Elena didn't dare move. She watched as Liam took a single step down, then another. Max didn't flinch. Liam walked to the bottom, knelt a few feet from the dog, and gently placed the blanket on the floor. Max stood. He limped forward slow, deliberate, and lay down on the blanket, just beside the boy. Liam didn't touch him. He didn't speak. But he sat there for nearly an hour, shoulder to shoulder with the retired K9 breathing in sync as the snow fell outside. That night, for the first time in months, Liam didn't sleep with the door locked. Max lay curled at the foot of his bed, eyes open, chest rising and falling slowly. Elena passed the doorway, tears in her eyes, heart in her throat. It was the beginning of something no one could explain. A boy who had lost his voice, and a dog who had lost his place in the world, drawn together like magnets. Two souls scarred by different battles, finding in each other something more powerful than comfort. They found purpose. Elena wrote later in her journal, Max didn't need words. And neither did Liam. They just knew at the time she couldn't know how deep their bond would run, or how, in the months to come, that connection would be tested in ways none of them could have imagined. But on that snowy morning in Vermont, as the last soldier stepped into a boy's broken world, something shifted. And nothing was ever the same again. For days after Max arrived, the house remained quiet. Not the kind of peaceful quiet that soothes the soul, but the heavy, suspended silence that fills a home when hearts are still healing. Liam stayed withdrawn, as always. He didn't speak. He didn't touch. He didn't even glance at his mother when she gently knocked on his door to offer food or ask if he wanted to take a walk. He simply sat in the far corner of his room, hood pulled up, headphones on, eyes fixed on the blank space in front of him, the same way he had ever since the accident. Max, meanwhile, settled in slowly. He ate when fed. He lay calmly in his crate during the day, watching the other dogs but rarely engaging. Elena noticed he never barked, not once. There was a solemn weight to him, like he carried ghosts no one else could see. His gaze often drifted to the window, as though waiting for a call back to duty that would never come. The sanctuary's staff, Elena, and a couple of local volunteers gave him space. He needs time, one said. But even Elena, who had seen dozens of service dogs come through her gates, felt there was something uniquely quiet about Max. Not broken, not angry, just distant, as though his spirit was still somewhere on that scorched California hillside, refusing to come home. And then came that night. It was near midnight when Elena woke with a start. Something had stirred her from sleep, perhaps a shift in the wind, or the sense, honed from years in field medicine, that something wasn't quite right. She padded barefoot down the hallway, checking the dogs in their designated sleeping crates. Everyone was accounted for, except Max. His crate door was slightly ajar. Her heart jumped, but before she could begin a full search, she noticed another door down the hall. Liam's door was cracked open, just enough for a whisper of hallway light to spill through. She moved closer, her breath caught in her chest, and there they were. Liam sat on the floor, cross-legged, his back against the wall. Across from him lay Max, his large head resting on his paws, eyes open but still, his breathing slow and deep. The boy and the dog weren't touching, but something invisible connected them, something that hummed in the air between them, delicate and undeniable. Elena didn't speak. She didn't dare. She leaned gently against the doorframe, watching, remembering how Liam used to fall asleep in his father's lap during movie nights, how he used to chase fireflies in the backyard until his cheeks flushed with laughter. That version of her son had disappeared after the crash. In his place was this shadow, fragile, quiet, and unreachable. But here he was reaching, even just a little. As minutes passed, Liam slowly slid down to the floor, curling onto his side. Without a sound, Max stood, limped the few steps closer, and lay beside him. The dog didn't sniff or nudge or demand attention. He simply pressed his side against Liam's back, lowered his head, and closed his eyes. Elena saw her son exhale long and deep and then, for the first time in months, fall asleep without medication. Max didn't move the entire night. The next morning, Liam emerged from his room just after dawn. He didn't speak, But he didn't hide either. He poured cereal for himself, then set a bowl of kibble on the floor for Max. No instructions had been given, no prompting. But Max, who had never taken food from anyone but Elena, ate every bite. From that day forward, the two were inseparable. Max followed Liam like a silent guardian. When Liam sat on the porch swing, Max lay at his feet. When Liam scribbled in his sketchbook, Max rested his chin on the edge of the table. When Liam trembled at sudden thunder or refused to leave the house, Max would nudge him gently, pressing his solid weight against the boy's leg until he stood. The changes weren't drastic. Liam still didn't speak much. He still flinched at loud sounds, and the dark circles under his eyes lingered. But there were moments brief, flickering ones when the light came back, like the time he hummed along to an old tune Elena played on the record player, or the afternoon he took Max's leash without being asked and walked him gently around the backyard, whispering something only Max could hear. Word spread quickly in their small town. People talked at the coffee shop, at the post office, at the diner on Main Street. That dog used to pull people out of burning buildings, you know. Now he's saving a boy no one else could reach. Elena heard the murmurs, saw the curious looks when she brought Max in for his vet checkups. Some folks called it a miracle. Others said it was just coincidence. But Elena knew better. She knew what it meant to carry trauma so heavy it lived in your bones. She had lost friends in the field, held their paws, buried their tags. She had faced nights of shaking hands and sleepless dread, waking up from dreams of explosions and silence. And she had survived. Now she watched as two beings, one human, one canine, fought their way back from the edge, without words, without expectations, just by being present. They didn't need to speak. They didn't need to explain. They simply understood. And for the first time since the accident, Elena began to believe that maybe, just maybe, healing was possible, not with force, not with therapy scripts or carefully chosen words, but with time, with patience, and with the quiet, unwavering companionship of someone who knew what it meant to suffer and still choose to stay. Because sometimes, the most powerful friendships need no voice at all. The snow had been falling for hours. Thick, heavy flakes drifted across the hills of Vermont, muffling every sound like a blanket laid gently over the world. The sanctuary was still. Most of the dogs were curled in their crates, bellies full, lulled by the hush of a winter night. Elena was finishing up paperwork at the kitchen table. It was past midnight, and she had planned to head to bed an hour ago, but something felt off. She couldn't place it. A chill beyond the cold weather, a tightness in her chest that made her glance out the window every few minutes. She stood up to check on the dogs one last time. The room smelled of pine shavings and old wool blankets. Crates lined the far wall, each with a name tag. Max's was near the door, where he liked to sleep, always with a view of the hallway. But as Elena approached, she stopped cold. The crate door was open. At first, she thought she'd forgotten to latch it. But Max was a disciplined dog, trained to stay put unless told otherwise. The blanket inside was still warm. The snow by the back door had been disturbed. Her heart began to race. She rushed upstairs, 2 steps at a time, and flung open Liam's door. Empty. "Liam?" she called out, voice tight with fear. A small sound like a breath caught in a throat came from the corner. Liam was sitting there, knees to his chest, trembling. His eyes were wide, locked on hers, and for the first time in what felt like forever, he spoke, his voice cracked and desperate. "Max is gone." It wasn't a question. It wasn't a whisper. It was a cry that pierced the quiet and shattered something in both of them. Elena dropped to her knees, wrapping her arms around her son. He didn't pull away, but his body was stiff, frozen with panic. She held him tightly, her mind already racing through possibilities. Had Max wandered into the woods? Chased after something? Been taken? She called the local police station, animal control, the nearest vet clinic. No one had seen anything. Then, just after 4 a.m., the phone rang. Elena answered on the first ring. "Mrs. Collins?" a voice said. "This is Officer Green from County Patrol. We believe we have your dog." Her breath caught. "Where?" "He's up on Millstone Ridge." A hiker found him near the trailhead, just off the main road. He's hurt badly. There was a child with him, a little girl. She's okay. Max was lying beside her when help arrived. Elena couldn't believe what she was hearing. What girl? We're not sure yet, the officer replied. She was reported missing earlier this evening. 7 years old. She must have slipped while sledding and fell down the slope. We think Max found her and stayed with her. The next hour was a blur. Elena dressed Liam in warm clothes, barely able to get her fingers into her coat sleeves. Liam moved mechanically, still silent, his eyes locked on the floor of the car as they sped toward the ridge. When they arrived, flashing lights cast blue and red shadows across the snow. Emergency vehicles were parked along the narrow roadside. Paramedics were tending to a small girl wrapped in a thermal blanket, crying softly into her father's chest. And then they saw him, Max. He was lying in the snow, barely moving. One leg twisted unnaturally beneath him. Blood darkened the fur along his back and hips. His chest rose and fell in shallow, wheezing breaths. One paramedic knelt beside him, applying pressure to a wound near his ribs. Liam broke into a run. "Wait, Liam," Elena called, but the boy didn't stop. He dropped to his knees beside Max, tears streaming down his face, his small hands hovering helplessly over the dog's body. "Please," he sobbed. "Please don't die. You didn't give up on me." "I'm not letting you go." Max let out a rough exhale, as if the sound of Liam's voice stirred something deep inside him. One ear twitched. His eyes fluttered open, just for a moment. It was the faintest flicker of awareness. A response. And it was enough. Elena knelt beside them, her arms around both, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Hang on, Max," she whispered. "You're not done yet." A search and rescue officer came over to explain what they had pieced together. The little girl had wandered away from her backyard while her family was distracted inside. Somehow, Max had made it all the way to the ridge, over a mile from the sanctuary, through deep snow and bitter cold. No one could explain how he had known, or why. But the girl had been found with a length of weathered rope in her hands, part of an old emergency training kit Max had kept near his crate. The rest of it had been gripped in Max's jaws. The other end was wrapped around the trunk of a tree at the top of the slope. It looked like Max had tied it there himself. He had pulled her up, and then he had collapsed. Elena couldn't make sense of it. The logistics, the distance, the instinct. But as she looked down at Max, at the way his body was broken and battered but still clinging to life, she realized somewhere deep inside him, the mission had never ended. No one had called him. No one had issued a command, but something in him had known. Someone needed saving. And Max had gone, without hesitation, without question, because for a dog like him, a hero trained to act when others freeze, some instincts never die. The veterinary clinic was small, tucked behind a hardware store on the edge of town, but it was warm and smelled faintly of lavender and rubbing alcohol. Elena had been there many times over the years, bringing in aging rescues for checkups, vaccinations, the occasional sprain or limp, but today was different. Today, Max lay on a stainless steel table in the back exam room, barely conscious, an oxygen mask fitted over his muzzle and the fourth fluids dripping slowly into his front leg. His body was wrapped in gauze and blankets, but the swelling in his back and hindquarters was impossible to hide. The x-rays had confirmed the worst. His pelvis was shattered, his spinal cord was bruised, and his already damaged rear leg, scarred from the wildfire years ago, was fractured in multiple places. Dr. Reynolds, the town's longtime vet, stood beside the table, arms folded tightly across his chest. He had known Elena for a decade. He had treated dozens of her dogs. His voice was gentle, but steady. "Elena, I need to be honest with you," he said. "These injuries are extensive. Given Max's age, his previous trauma, and the pain he's already in, the most humane option may be to let him go." Elena didn't respond right away. Her eyes were on Max, her jaw tight. He looked so small, they're so unlike the powerful dog who had once bounded through snow with Liam, ears perked and eyes sharp. "But he saved that little girl," she said quietly, almost to herself. "I know," Dr. Reynolds said. He's a hero. But heroism doesn't always mean we can save them in return. In the corner of the room, Liam sat on a bench, his knees drawn up to his chest, his arms wrapped tightly around them. He hadn't spoken since the drive here. Elena had tried soft words, a hand on his shoulder, but he'd pulled away, retreating into himself the way he always did when the world became too much. Now he moved. Slowly he got to his feet and walked over to the table. The room fell silent as he reached out and placed his hand gently on Max's head. The dog didn't move, but his breathing changed just slightly. A tremor passed through his chest, a faint twitch in one ear. Liam's voice, when it came, was cracked and low. "You didn't stop for me," he whispered, barely audible. "I won't stop for you." Elena felt her heart twist. She watched as her son stood there, still so small, so quiet, and repeated the words. Again, louder this time. "You didn't stop for me. I won't stop for you." The conviction in his voice was like nothing she'd heard from him before. Not since before the accident. Not since the day everything changed. One of the vet nurses, a young woman named Jess, stepped into the room just then, holding a clipboard. She paused at the doorway, taking in the scene. Her expression softened. "There might be another option," she said quietly. Everyone turned toward her. "There's a facility in Boston, the Carter Institute," Jess continued. "They specialize in orthopedic trauma for working animals, military dogs, rescue dogs. I interned there last summer. They've seen cases like this before," Elena blinked, "but we're 3 hours away. And the cost," Jess nodded. "It's not cheap. And I won't lie, recovery would be long and hard. But they've got resources we don't. Equipment we don't. And they have a foundation for dogs who served in the field." Max could qualify, Elena hesitated, her mind spinning. The Carter Institute was renowned in veterinary circles. Cutting-edge treatments, top specialists, but also a place with long wait lists and towering medical bills. She was a single mom running a non-profit on donations and personal grit. Her savings were already stretched thin. She looked down at Max, then at Liam. He was staring at her now. Not begging, not demanding. But there was something raw in his eyes, a kind of plea that went deeper than words. "I can't lose him," Liam said, tears slipping down his cheeks. Not again. It wasn't just about Max. Elena could see that now. This was about everything Liam had lost and everything he had found again quietly, slowly in the presence of this dog. She knew what it felt like to lose someone who saved you. During her last tour overseas, she'd watched her closest friend and fellow vet tech, Angela, take shrapnel from an explosion meant for both of them. Angela hadn't survived. And for months, Elena had lived with that guilt, the weight of survival. Now she looked at her son, this child she had fought so hard to protect, and realized that if she said no, if she turned away from this choice, the loss wouldn't just be Max's. It would be Liam's. And possibly it would undo every fragile piece of healing that had taken root since Max came into their lives. She crouched beside Liam and gently brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "We'll find a way," she said softly. "I don't know how yet, but we'll try." Liam leaned into her for the first time in months. It wasn't a hug, but it was enough. And in that moment, as Max lay broken but breathing, something else took root in the room, a fragile kind of hope, a belief not in odds or logic, but in love. Because sometimes, love is what makes us fight the hardest, even when everything says we shouldn't. The Carter Institute for Advanced Veterinary Medicine sat like a beacon on the outskirts of Boston's sleek glass walls, state-of-the-art surgical suites, and a reputation for saving animals most clinics had long given up on. When Max arrived, heavily sedated and wrapped in thermal blankets, a team was already waiting. Liam stood quietly in the lobby as specialists wheeled Max away, the sound of rolling casters echoing across the polished floor. It would be hours before they heard anything. Dr. Carter himself, a tall, soft-spoken man with graying hair and eyes that missed nothing, met with Elena to explain the procedure. "Max's injuries are significant," he said, carefully pointing to the scans. "We'll begin with stabilizing the pelvic fractures. After that, we'll reassess the leg. The nerve damage is severe, but there's still a narrow window of hope." Elena nodded, but her thoughts were with Liam, who was now sitting cross-legged in the corner of the waiting room, sketching quietly in a notebook. He had drawn Max again. This version was different, though. The dog's eyes were open, alert, alive. The surgery lasted nearly 7 hours. When Dr. Carter finally returned, his face was lined with exhaustion, but not defeat. He made it through, he said. The next 72 hours are critical. Max remained in the ICU wing, surrounded by monitors, tubes, and silent machines that blinked and beeped with his every breath. He looked fragile, nothing like the brave creature who had saved a child and crossed a frozen forest to do it. But he was alive, and Liam was there. Every morning before sunrise, Liam sat beside Max's enclosure. He brought his sketchbook and a small stack of picture books he used to read with his father. He never spoke much, but the staff quickly learned that he didn't need to. Nurses and techs began calling it the Liam effect. Max's heart rate stabilized when Liam sat near him. His blood pressure dropped. His oxygen levels improved. Even on the days when Max wouldn't eat for anyone else, he would lick peanut butter off Liam's fingers without hesitation. The connection was undeniable. "It's like he waits for the boy," one nurse whispered. "Like he's holding on for him." On day 10, Max spiked a fever. The doctors discovered a post-surgical infection beginning to spread through the damaged tissue in his rear leg. It was the complication they had feared. If the infection reached the bone, they might have no choice but to amputate or worse. That night, Liam refused to leave. Elena tried gently, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Sweetheart, you need to sleep. We'll come back first thing." But Liam shook his head, lips trembling. "He's scared," he whispered. "I can feel it. He needs me." Dr. Carter made an exception. A small cot was placed beside Max's enclosure. Liam lay there in silence, his hand against the mesh, just close enough for Max to sense him. He didn't sleep. He just watched, listened. And around 3 a.m., when Max began breathing harder, unevenly, Liam was the first to notice. He bolted upright and called for help. The team rushed in. Fourth, antibiotics were adjusted, the wound flushed again. His temperature finally began to drop by sunrise. Dr. Carter found Liam slumped in the cot the next morning, his head resting against a balled-up hoodie, dark circles under his eyes. Max was sleeping 2 more peacefully than he had in days. Dr. Carter crouched beside Liam, his voice gentle. "You may have just saved his life again." Liam didn't say anything. He didn't need to. Over the following weeks, Max slowly regained strength. Physical therapy began first with assisted movement, then hydrotherapy in a custom-built pool. His rear leg remained the most fragile, but he was moving, healing. Liam stayed for all of it. He sat quietly during treatments, scribbling notes or drawings. When Max winced, Liam flinched. When Max made progress, Liam's eyes would light up with a joy Elena hadn't seen in over a year. The staff began leaving little gifts for Liam: a set of markers, a Boston Red Sox cap, a dog-shaped bookmark. Everyone felt it, the weight of this boy's quiet devotion. One of the nurses even started a journal, logging Max's recovery alongside drawings Liam had left on the whiteboard. "It's like we're watching 2 patients recover," she told Elena one day. One in the bed and one beside it. Elena knew what she meant. Because Liam was changing, he still didn't speak much. He still flinched at sirens or sudden shouts. But he was present, grounded, no longer drifting in his own world. Max had become his anchor. They shared something no one else could quite name, a kind of silent bravery that came from being broken but not beaten, from knowing pain and choosing to fight anyway. Max had saved Liam. Now Liam was returning the favor. And in the quiet corners of a high-tech hospital meant for healing warriors, a boy and his dog reminded everyone around them that sometimes the strongest medicine isn't found in machines or medications. Sometimes it's simply the steady rhythm of a familiar heartbeat, in the presence of someone who refuses to leave your side. It had been 4 long months since Max had been rushed into emergency surgery that cold winter morning. 4 months of operations, of whispered updates, of quiet tears and cautious hope. 4 months of small miracles, setbacks, and unwavering devotion. And now finally he was coming home. The drive from Boston to Vermont felt like a dream. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting warm light across the frost-covered hills. Elena sat in the front seat, hands tense on the wheel, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror every few seconds. Liam sat in the back, next to Max's transport crate. The boy's hand rested gently through the mesh, his fingers lightly touching the dog's fur. Max's eyes were half-lidded, calm but alert. He didn't move much, he couldn't, but his ears perked slightly when Liam spoke, when familiar scents returned, when the sound of tires crunching gravel signaled their arrival at the sanctuary. Home. The sanctuary staff stepped outside to greet them, but everyone instinctively kept quiet. It felt sacred, this moment. No grand welcome, no clapping. Just the wind through pine trees and the sound of the crate door opening. Max stepped out slowly. One paw, then another. He didn't stumble. He didn't cry out. He simply stood tall, steady, proud on three legs, his injured rear leg still bandaged and carefully braced. His coat was patchy from surgeries, and his frame thinner than before, but his eyes burned bright, clear, full of fire and memory. Liam held the custom harness they had ordered just for Max, specially designed to support his weight during recovery. He knelt down, clipped it gently around Max's body, then gave a quiet command. "Let's go, buddy." They moved together across the gravel path, step by slow step. Max limped forward, adjusting his rhythm to the brace. Liam matched him stride for stride, as if they had rehearsed this dance 100 times in their dreams. Elena didn't follow them right away. She stood on the porch, one hand covering her mouth, tears brimming in her eyes. She watched her son, who once wouldn't leave his room, who couldn't speak above a whisper, now guiding his best friend like a seasoned physical therapist. They entered the room that had once been a spare guest bedroom. Now it was a recovery space converted carefully by Elena and a few volunteers during the weeks leading up to Max's return. The floors were padded with non-slip mats. Low ramps replaced stairs. Shelves held therapy tools, treats, towels, medical supplies. A large orthopedic dog bed waited in the corner, with Liam's old blanket folded neatly on top. Max sniffed the room once, then walked in with a sense of quiet familiarity. Liam unclipped the harness and whispered, "It's your turn now." "I'll help you walk again." Max turned his head, looked at Liam, and gently pressed his muzzle to the boy's hand. Outside the door, Elena pressed her back against the wall, overcome. These weren't just moments of physical recovery. They were something deeper. Two beings who had once fallen apart, slowly fitting the pieces back together with each other's help. That night, the house was quiet again. Not the heavy, sorrowful silence of months past, but the gentle stillness of peace. Liam had insisted on sleeping in the recovery room, curled up in a sleeping bag next to Max's bed. Elena checked on them once, just before midnight. Both were asleep, Liam's hand resting on Max's shoulder, the dog breathing in slow, even waves. She smiled and turned to leave, but around 2 a.m., she was awakened by a strange scratching sound. Soft, urgent, repeating. She got out of bed, heart suddenly thudding, and followed the noise down the hallway. It was Max. He stood outside her door, braced on his 3 good legs, panting heavily, his eyes locked on her. Elena's pulse quickened. Max didn't bark, didn't whine. He simply turned and hobbled toward the recovery room, stopping just short of the doorway, looking back. Elena rushed past him. Liam was burning with fever, his cheeks flushed, his breathing shallow. She touched his forehead, scalding. Quickly, she retrieved his emergency medication kit, administered the first round, and sat beside him as his breathing steadied over the next hour. She looked back toward the doorway. Max hadn't moved. He was lying on the threshold, watching, like a sentinel, a soldier who had heard danger and responded without hesitation. Again. Later, when Liam's fever broke and he drifted back into sleep, Elena lay beside him for a moment, gently running her hand over his hair. Max was curled at their feet now, eyes finally closed, his job once more complete. She whispered, "Thank you, not just for the warning, but for everything, for coming back, for staying." In the days that followed, Liam and Max began therapy together, daily routines of stretching, short walks, strength building. Liam led each session with quiet focus, marking Max's progress on a chart they'd pinned to the wall. Each checkmark felt like a celebration, and the house, for the first time in over a year, felt full again. Not just of movement or sound, but of life. Of light. Max wasn't the same dog he'd been before. He would never sprint through the woods again, or leap over fallen trees. And Liam wasn't the same boy. He'd seen too much pain, felt too much silence. But together, they had returned. Changed. Healed. Transformed. They weren't just boy and dog anymore. They were something more. Family. Warriors. Survivors. And in a world where light often fades, they had become each other's sunrise. 1 year later, the scars had not disappeared. They were there in the way Max limped slightly as he walked beside Liam through the yard, in the faint lines on Elena's face etched by worry and time, in the softness of Liam's voice, still carrying the tremble of someone who had seen too much, too young. But the scars told a different story now, not of endings, but of survival, of love, of returning from the edge. The story of Max and Liam had started as a quiet miracle, but like all true things, it had found its way beyond the walls of the Collins sanctuary. Word spread, first through neighbors, then local newspapers. One article became 5. Then a news team came out to film a short segment, a photograph of Liam and Max sitting side by side in the snow. One child, one dog, both looking toward the horizon, became a symbol for something far greater than just rescue. It became a story of coming back. When Liam was invited to speak at his school assembly, Elena hesitated. She knew crowds still made him nervous, but he surprised her with a nod. Just once. He wanted to do it. On the day of the assembly, he stood behind the microphone, his hands shaking slightly, but his voice clear. Max didn't just save me. He told a gymnasium filled with students, teachers, and parents. He taught me how to come back. He held up a picture of Max, not as a broken dog in recovery, but as a strong, three-legged guardian with eyes full of light. I used to think I was alone, Liam said, his voice steady now. But I wasn't. Max showed me that even when you're hurt, even when you're scared, you can still find your way home. The room was silent. And then, a standing ovation. From that moment, the world took notice. With support from local leaders, donations from those who had followed the story, and the backing of the Carter Institute, the Max Project was founded, an organization devoted to helping retired working dogs receive the medical care, rehabilitation, and dignified lives they deserved. Each donation came with a handwritten thank you card, signed by Liam, and sealed with Max's paw print. Elena was asked to serve as an advisor. It wasn't a role she had sought, but one she stepped into with quiet humility. She spoke on behalf of those who couldn't both the animals and the people who'd carried pain silently for years. Slowly, gently, she began to forgive herself for what had happened overseas. The memories of her friend Angela no longer haunted her with guilt, but lived within her as a reminder. Love does not end with loss. Max, of course, remained at the heart of it all. Though he could no longer run, his spirit was unchanged. Every morning he greeted Liam at the door of his room, tail wagging, eyes alert. And every night he took his place beside the boy's bed, lying down with practiced stillness, ears trained toward any sound, body coiled with quiet readiness. Elena once asked Liam if he thought Max knew he wasn't on duty anymore. Liam had smiled faintly, then looked at Max. "You're still on duty," he whispered, brushing a hand over the dog's scarred head. I know. Max didn't move, but his tail thumped once against the floor, just enough to say, "Yes, I'm here." And so, their life unfolded, not without challenges, but with purpose. The sanctuary grew, welcoming more dogs in need, elderly service animals, injured nines, companions left behind after retirement. Each one found warmth, medical care, and most importantly, a sense of belonging. Liam continued to draw, his notebooks filled with images of dogs and boys, of fire and snow, of light rising over dark valleys. He never needed many words. His pictures spoke clearly enough. At night, Elena would sometimes stand at the door to his room, watching as he lay beneath the blankets. Sketchbook on his chest, Max curled at his side. The boy no longer flinched in sleep, no longer cried out. The weight of his past now rested gently on his shoulders, not gone, but bearable. And always Max was there, watching, protecting, loving. He had no medals, no ceremony, no flag draped in his honor. But in the quiet hours, when only the stars watched over the Vermont hills, a retired soldier, one who had saved lives and nearly lost his own, kept watch over the heart of a child who had once needed saving. Not because anyone had asked him to, but because he chose to, because some missions never really end, they just change shape. And some soldiers, the truest kind, never stop serving. Even when no one's watching, even when the world forgets. So there, beneath the fading sky, where the wind sang low and the pines stood tall, a boy and his dog walked side by side, each step slow, each breath shared. Two survivors, two lights, two souls forever bound, not by fate, not by chance, but by the kind of love that heals even the deepest wounds and keeps on healing forever. If this story moved something in your heart, if it reminded you of someone who stayed when others walked away, or if it whispered hope into a corner of your soul, you're not alone. Max didn't just save me. He taught me how to come back. These were Liam's words, but they echo in all of us, because we all carry invisible wounds. We all long for that one soul who sees us not for our pain, but for our fight to heal. Today, Liam is no longer the silent boy he once was. Max still limps, but he walks with purpose. Together, they remind us that love doesn't fix what's broken. It walks with us as we heal. If you believe in second chances, in quiet courage, and in the kind of love that never gives up, please consider subscribing to this channel. Your support is not just a number. It's fuel for more stories that uplift, inspire, and heal. Leave a comment, share this video with someone who needs it, and remember, scars are not signs of weakness. They are proof that we survived. Thank you for watching. You've just been part of something more than a story. You've witnessed a lesson in devotion, healing, and the last mission of a soldier who never stopped serving.